All right, Trevor Kids, we are live college football playoff episode, and I'm excited for this game. We didn't do an episode for college football this week, so I wanted to come on live here on the YouTube channel to go ahead and present this. We got some thoughts about the game. I'm going to give out what I've gone ahead and already bet at this point in time. But before we do so, one college football note I do want to go ahead and touch on, and that is the decision of Sam Hartman to go ahead and transfer to Notre Dame. The reason I want to touch on this to begin with is because this is a huge get for Notre Dame. This actually puts them back into the conversation of potentially a legitimate program next year. It's bad news for Tommy Rees, though, because he's going to actually have to show that he can coach and be an efficient offensive coordinator, because he's got himself actually a top-tier quarterback. And this is the first time in a long time that we can point to Notre Dame's quarterback and say that is actually a solid quarterback. Marcus Freeman gets a huge get there. So that will be really interesting to see as it develops. But let's talk about why we are all actually here today. And that is National Football Playoff. This is going to be a good one, guys. Right now, line is at 13.5 at most spots. Some places you might be able to get a 13. And whenever I break down a game, and we're going to kind of go through this as I normally would break down a game, I initially look at the trench. That is where games are won and lost. It's an oversimplification probably a little bit to say that, but that is the first spot I look at when I'm looking to break down a game. And right now, I'm having a hard time making arguments for TCU here. Now, we talked about this for the playoff game here, though. TCU does run a 3-3-5 defense. So when we look at the Georgia offensive line and that offense and what they're bringing to the table versus that TCU defense, we're going to line scrimmage. We talked about with it at Michigan. You know, I was saying it's a little bit hard to gauge this. I think Michigan has the edge there. They had a great offensive line, and we saw in that game, though, that TCU did a really good job. Now, that 3-3-5 has given Michigan some trouble in the past. TCU's entire defense is designed to have really good gap integrity, to make you have to bounce the ball outside where they can rely on their speed guys who do play downhill, the extra safeties in the box, come up and make tackles. They don't want you to run in between the A and B gaps. And so that's their kind of philosophy. The problem here is I don't know if they're going to be able to stay with a 3-3-5 defense. Georgia is big and physical up top, and the thing that they had that Michigan didn't have is they have elite tight end blockers. Now, Michigan was down in their tight end room due to injuries decimating that room. Georgia has an elite tight end room. Now, the big question is going to be Darnell Washington's health. Right now, he is a game-time decision. If he can go, he is an elite run blocker. So you have that extra guy in the box. They're missing size TCU up front, so I'm really struggling to see how they're going to go ahead and stay there with this team and win in the trenches, because I think early they might be able to stay with them. You know, early they can kind of get in there, but as the game wears on, as that size and speed takes over, I really give the edge to Georgia on that one. And then we flip the side. You know, TCU, it's interesting here because I think the easy thing to say is Georgia needs to get pressure. Obviously, anybody needs to get pressure in order to stop an offense like this. The problem, though, is even though TCU's offense of line isn't great, I wouldn't categorize them as elite in any fashion. TCU's entire offense is built around getting the ball out quick RPOs, reads, quick passing. It's not designed to kind of hold on to the ball very long. So it's really hard to manufacture pressure. We saw this in the Michigan game, where Michigan all season has been really good at manufacturing pressure, especially in passing downs. But they did struggle in that game. And a lot of that has to do with how quick Mac Duggins gets the ball out of his hand. So when we look at the trenches, I think Georgia's offensive line versus the TCU's defensive line, there's a huge advantage for Georgia there. When we flip the side, I do think that Georgia has the better defensive line, and Kirby plays these light boxes because he firmly believes that, you know, his guys can win up front, that they can win in the trenches. Jalen Carter coming back was a huge thing for this Georgia defensive line. But with the fact that TCU gets the ball out so quickly, they get their plays off quickly, I'm interested to see how Kirby adjusts to try to counteract that. Now, they do have some experience kind of playing against a TCU style offense because they went up against it in Tennessee. So I figured they're probably going to do very similar things. But that's kind of where we start. The other factor is a lot of people point to the TCU Michigan game and how, including myself, if you listened last week, I bet Michigan on that. I picked Michigan. It wasn't my most confident bet. I did say it was a lean. I wasn't hard pressed on it. But we did talk about how JJ McCarthy might have some issues against this 3-5 defense, and the speed they have in their secondary, and losing control of his ability to stay calm in big moments. That's not really a concern here for the Stetson Bennett and Georgia offense. Stetson Bennett, as everybody knows, is 25 years old. He's calm, cool, and collected in the pocket. And so with that, I don't have the same concerns because at the end of the day, his splits aren't as bad as JJ's were. When you look at a normal defense versus a